Opening the declassified documents, we return to 1944 in Bonn, in a cold, hidden trench, where a corporal overhears a secret on a radio. Germany has been captured. A German tank commander reports coordinates not for his own tanks, but for the positions of American troops. Just 2 meters away, 300 American soldiers were sleeping. Right in the midst of danger, Eddie Voss had only a second to make a difficult decision. Either obey orders and let 300 men be killed, or violate military discipline and become an enemy. Eddie pressed the broadcast button and spoke German perfectly. Making a taboo radio call saved the lives of an entire battalion, and this is why the U.S. military wants to bury the truth forever. To understand Eddie Voss's decision and its importance, first, you must understand the chaotic situation of December 1944. The Battle of the Bunch was not just a battle, but Hitler's final, desperate, and spectacular attempt. He deployed 250 troops and over 1,000 tanks into the Aden Ocean, an area that the Allies believed to be peaceful. However, the American defensive line was not only bent but also shattered. Entire units were surrounded, regiments were cut off, and the command structure collapsed. Under those harsh conditions, the most important asset was not ammunition or food, but communication, which was in fact in a state of paralysis. The U.S. Army's signal team fell into disarray. The broadcasters were unable to make contact because their equipment was not working in the extreme cold. The battery died quickly, and the air was filled with noise from interfering radio waves, desperate calls for help, and the language used. When the Germans launched a rapid attack, their communications were even better than those of the defenders. Their entire force is coordinating well while the Americans are becoming deaf. This is when Corporal Eddie Voss appears. Eddie is not considered a hero. He had almost no reason to listen. I am the child of German immigrants. His family immigrated to the United States in 1923 and settled in Milwaukee. Before the attack on Pearl Harbor, German was the main language at home, and he learned it from his grandmother, not only vocabulary but also intonation and rhythm. When Eddie joined the Army in 1943, he was tested on his German language skills and was certified as fluent. However, his job wasn't to be a spy or a paper salesman, but rather to join the 101 Airborne as a battlefield radio operator. His job mainly involved repairing equipment, transmitting coordinates, and maintaining communication lines. In 1944, Eddie spent most of his time in cold, damp, and dreary conditions until Hitler's attack occurred and cut off his unit. His orders were simple: survive and keep the radio running. Armed with an SCR-300 radio and a pair of headphones salvaged from a German motor vehicle, Eddie began listening. Although the U.S. military has strict regulations against tracking enemy signals, Eddie decided to break that rule out of curiosity and a desperate desire to save her comrades. Initially, it was just short conversations with news about ammunition and troop movements. But then Eddie's gift proved effective. He not only heard the sounds, but also recognized the patterns in the message. He began taking notes and drawing rudimentary maps based on units and time, which helped him analyze information and understand the characteristics of each signal. Through this process, Eddie gradually came to understand the commanders and what they were doing. This section is quite different. His nickname is Isen Phosphor Iron Fish 4. His voice is deep and hoarse, sounding like that of a smoker. This man is very cautious. Every action is meticulously calculated. Eddie recorded Iron Fish 4 times in one day. 2 days. He barely slept, spending his time listening and taking notes. Within 48 hours, Eddie had a clear understanding of this man. He knew the commander operating northeast of Bastonia that their fuel situation was extremely critical and the reason for the commander's caution. On Monday night, Eddie heard a heated argument, which was Iron Fish 4, whom Eddie had started calling Klaus in his notes. Klüser is arguing with his own orders. He's not stubborn, he's very professional, but he's extremely angry right now. Klüser refused to allow his convoy to follow the new route until it had been inspected by engineers. He kept repeating that the 2 tanks had been lost and that this couldn't happen again. Eddie's blood ran cold. Klüser was not only cautious, but also psychologically traumatized. Over the past week, he has lost 2 tanks and 2 crews of soldiers due to American minefields. He led his soldiers into a trap based on misinformation, and he doesn't want that to happen again. This is a significant moment. Eddie realized something about the German Army's radio discipline. WMX's communication theory is rigorous, systematic, and frighteningly effective. But this isn't normal. This is the command center for the attack. The German army was exhausted, and their equipment was malfunctioning. In their desperation to keep moving, they began cutting back on processes. They didn't use the codes correctly to validate the signal, and there wasn't enough time. Instead, they relied on recognition, familiarity, knowing the voice of their officer, and the familiar rhythm of commands. That's faster and more practical. And as Eddie sat in his trench, he realized this was a serious weakness. Clouser, who lost 2 tanks. A person who is afraid of themselves will doubt commands from an unfamiliar voice. They will ask for confirmation. But what happens if an order is relayed that sounds exactly like the voice of his superiors? What if that order confirmed his deepest fears? If it promises safety from the very thing he fears most? Eddie understood something about psychology that the military didn't teach. Skeptics don't doubt everything. They only suspect unusual things, things that don't fit the model. But if you perfectly match the model, if you hear exactly what they expect, then suspicion will arise. The brain simply accepts familiarity and continues on. Eddie now knows how to talk to Clouser. He knew the person's nickname. He knows his frequency. He knows his fear. He holds a psychological key in his hands. The moral burden of what he was considering was terrible. This is not war. This is impersonation. Not only is he violating military regulations, he will be engaging in psychological warfare alone, without permission. If captured, and if the Germans discovered the deception and located him, they would shell his trench until only a pool of smoke remained. But worse than that, he would be deceiving someone he knew, perhaps even respected. Clouser is the enemy. Plus will kill Americans. But Clouser was also a human being, a professional soldier who was traumatized by the loss. He is trying to do his job and keep his teammates alive. And now, Eddie is planning to exploit that man's injury to lead him and his entire regiment to their deaths. Eddie stared at his notes as the snow fell harder, making the outside world seem suffocating. The ethical calculation is both simple and terrifying. Clouser and his 40 tanks faced 300 sleeping American infantrymen with no good options. They had to choose whichever would save more lives on his side. He started running through the scenarios in his head. How did he manage to get the tone right? His grandmother's German is proving effective, but Klaus's commanders heard differently. They had an aristocratic accent, pronouncing words accurately and confidently. He began whispering into the cold air as he practiced. Een F here Obando incorrect intonation wrong fear. Here Panagop commando. Closer, you must become a general. You have become too engrossed in your plan, too absorbed in the silence, without hearing the footsteps imprinted on the snow behind you. Corporal Uy jerked up the person. Standing at the edge of his battle uniform was not a fellow soldier, he was an officer. Beside him were 2 snowplow soldiers pushing on their shoulders. That person held out his hand, giving me the headset. Corporal, it was Captain Morrison. Eddie's stomach sank, and he took off his headphones. The sounds of German voices still echoed. Sir, I can explain. Eddie said, I've been monitoring the enemy's frequency without permission for 4 days now. Morrison's voice was cold. Control. This type of control usually comes into play before an explosion occurs. He wrote in notebooks full of information that he wasn't allowed to collect, and he used an enemy radio without informing his commander. One of the soldiers stepped down from the combat uniform. He said nothing, just began disconnecting Eddie's device. The SCR-3 was removed first, then the captured German headset, and then the other soldier reached for the notebook. No, sir, please. Eddie watched what he had made. The blueprints, disappear into an equipment bag. It made him feel as though they were taking his brain apart. Sir, you don't understand. There's a tank unit called Icenia. I understand perfectly. Corporal Morrison interrupted him, his voice icy. He was just a radio operator. He wasn't an intelligence analyst. We have staff trained for this, but they moving to the Western Fuel Depot here tonight. There are 300 soldiers sleeping there. Enough. Morrison's jaw tightened. Do you know how many false reports intelligence agencies receive every day? Every young soldier who knew a little German in high school thought they had deciphered the Enigma code from a trench. That's correct, sir. I've been following that person for days. I recognize his voice. I understand his fear. Morrison looked at Eddie and said, You're listening to information on the radio that you weren't trained to understand. That could be a scam campaign. The Germans know that we are monitoring their frequencies, so they constantly provide us with misinformation. Eddie felt something break inside him. It wasn't anger, but something colder. Realizing that Morrison was uninterested, he had no intention of checking and was simply following procedure. Officer, please verify that. Send someone to the warehouse and tell them to prepare for contact. That's the only thing I'm asking for. Morrison looked at EY for a moment, a tense expression on his face. When he spoke, his tone was almost gentle, which made it even worse. Voss, you're a good radio operator. He maintained contact under unimaginable conditions, but he crossed a serious line. Immediately, he was no longer allowed to monitor the enemy's frequency. You must not discuss any confidential information you possess with anyone. And if I hear you tampering with enemy equipment again, I will force you to appear before a military court. Do you understand? Yes, officer's letter. Those words are like dust and ashes. Good. Morrison stood up. Go to sleep. Eddie had never eaten a pear of anything in his life. He has never disobeyed a direct order. But sitting in that freezing cellar, with everything he knew, he realized his whole life. From a German grandmother to Transformers toys in Milwaukee to a misunderstanding over a pile of paperwork. Everything was ready for this moment. He put on his helmet, checked the bayonet, and then slowly and quietly climbed out of the bunker. He plunged into the snowstorm. A supply depot is a collection of canvas tents and wooden crates arranged for what optimistic planners call organization. But for Eddie, the problem solver from Milwaukee, it's just a system with patterns. He moved silently through the darkness like a ghost in a snowstorm. His breath formed small clouds that vanished into the falling snow. He wasn't a commando, but a radio operator. He was cold, very cold, and scared. But he's acting solely on cold anger. He knows the paths that history has taken. He knew which tent contained ammunition and which contained equipment awaiting intelligence verification. The confiscated radio will be kept in the CI tent, counterintelligence tent, a celebrated storage area, where the enemy's confiscated equipment awaits. Someone has valid access to attach the tag, write it in the catalog, and ship it to London or Washington. This tent has some security, but not much. Who would steal a broken German radio in the middle of war? Eddie crouched behind a stack of frozen supply crates. His eyes were fixed on the guard, a young kid, probably 19, stamping his feet against the cold. His rifle swings over his shoulder. Eddie didn't watch the guard. He wasted the pattern. The kid was cold. He was miserable. And he was predictable. He will stand at the 10 flap for seconds, then turn and walk 10 paces to his right to the corner of the next 10 just to feel the illusion of movement of warmth. Had stayed there for 10 seconds, then walked back a 40-second cycle, 10 seconds of which the 10 flaps were unwatched. 10 seconds was an eternity. Eddie waited for the turn. The moment the goes back was to him. He moved. He didn't run. He glided 3 long steps across the snow. He slipped under the 10 flap and was inside. He was an organized dozen. Luger pistols, binoculars, German helmets, stacks of maps all tagged, and in the corner, just as he expected, was the equipment back the MPs had taken. He grabbed it. It felt heavy. The radio was inside, but his notebook wasn't in the back. Panic surged in his throat. The radio was useless without the notes, the frequencies, the car signs, the patterns, Claw's voice. He scanned the tent. It was dark, lit only by a single low buff on a field desk, and there on the desk, weighted down by a coffee mug, was his notebook. On top of it was a small tip tag. Eddie is quiet to read it. The unauthorized information has been forwarded to the Spike Department for review. Source, CPL Voss. Eddie almost dropped the microphone out of relief. He tried to remain calm. Count 1, 2, 3. A commander is never in a hurry. A commander is supposed to be in control of the situation, but instead he pressed the play button. Infer and Fish 4 has a new order. EA actual angry code is compromat. The current attack route for the horse, Harvest, has been compromised. He released the feedback button almost instantly and in a state of disarray. Compromised Fian is incorrect. Compromised. I do not understand. We are ready. Plizer is suspicious. This is a crucial moment. Eddie's entire plan, the fate of 300 people, is tied to the next sentence. He has to sell this lie. He has to use the key. He pressed the I button again, letting his impatience and anger surge in his voice. Listen quietly. Aerial recognition has identified American minefields along the route you specified. Man area. It was a trap. I repeat, your proposed route is a trap. A long, drawn-out silence passed. Eddie could hear Clausa breathing on the other end of the radio. He could clearly sense the man's mind rewinding to the lost tanks, to the flames, to the screams, and the haunting memories Eddie had identified. Now, that pain felt like a knife cutting into his mind, and the silence lasted for almost 10 seconds. Understood, Standon's voice was even, devoid of any doubt. Only the chilling fear of someone who had just witnessed the horror they had always dreaded remained. The reason was speechlessness. The reason was that Eddie breathed a sigh of relief without realizing he had been holding his breath, and he succeeded. The next sentence, from Cuss, didn't surprise him. A new route was needed. Please, now is the time to decide. Eddie held the notebook. His grip was now firmer, the fear gone, replaced by a cold, terrifying concentration. He read out fake coordinates, but those coordinates led to a minefield. There was no route through there. Following the 88-point net, and then the decisive shot, the cause was Pioneer. The route has been confirmed as safe by engineers. He gave Clausa what he craved more than victory, the permission to feel at peace. A moment of silence passed. Perhaps Clausa was writing down the coordinates. Then one final question. What is the new goal? Eddie had prepared for this. You can't just lead him into an empty field. It must have been a convoy, a loosely guarded American supply convoy, a target Cloud could have aimed for. After hitting the target, hold your position. Wait for the next order, and the beauty of the lie lies in its humility. He didn't promise Klusa a glorious victory, just a small, believable tactical goal that wouldn't arouse suspicion. Plaza's response was quick and professional. We are standing on the route we understand. The safe route was provided by the convoy. Iron Fish 4. We will execute the order as scheduled, ending at 5:30. The silence faded away. Eddie released the transmission button. He sat there motionless, in a heavy, solemn silence. His whole body began to tremble. Intense chills swept through my body. He succeeded. Klaus accepted the order. In about 3 hours, 40 German tanks will confidently and safely advance into American minefields. They thought they were being ambushed. Eddie didn't feel like she was winning. He felt empty. He has just sentenced the soldiers. Plaza will die. The team members will die. They will die never knowing that they were deceived by a corporal in a freezing battlefield. He moved quickly, his hands numb. He buried the German radio deep under a layer of mud and loose soil in the corner of the trench. He buried the notebook as well. He covered that area up, making it look like it had never been touched. His life, his entire future, now depends on no one digging up that area. He sat down, exhausted, and looked at his watch. The time shifted from 22 to 24 hours, and at that very moment, a new, chilling, and terrible fear overwhelmed him. Klaus's real commanders, the real Panzer Command Group, will call them right at 2:30 in 6 minutes. What happens when they call and Klauser doesn't answer? Or worse, if Klauser responds and says he can't because he's carrying out other orders? Eddie realized that the deception wasn't over yet. It has just entered a new and terrifying phase. He sat in the darkness, his watch showing 2:25. In just 5 minutes, the Panzer Command Group would actually attempt to contact Klauser. He was now completely blind and terrified. The German army radio lay buried under 2 feet of cold mud. He couldn't hear, he couldn't communicate, he could do nothing but sit there waiting and wondering if his deception would fall apart. He pictured a scene somewhere, miles away, where a German army radio operator was preparing. He checked the frequency by looking at his watch. Eddie's deception relied on a simple but terrifying hope that the Germans would assume there had been a radio malfunction, not a ghost. Exactly 230 German radio operators pressed the button to transmit. Ion for fear here, command him Iron Fish for this, is the commander reporting the situation. Silence fell. Only the rustling of the cold night remained. The operator tried again, his voice slightly louder, somewhat irritated. Is in fear command Iron Fish for command confirmed silence. The operator turned to his superior, a colonel bowing his head. Sir, I have a map. Iron Fish 4 did not respond. We didn't look up. Perhaps he was just having trouble with his equipment. This cold weather is making things difficult for the battery. Try an alternative frequency. The operator switched the call frequency again and again. Now we begin to look up, frowning, which is unlike Klauser. Klauser is a professional. He always responded. Is it interference? The lieutenant colonel asked. Or not? Usually, sir. The operator replied. The frequency is perfectly clear. He just wasn't there. A chilling fear began to seep into the German command room. Was Klauser ambushed before the attack? The U.S. military might launch a surprise attack, but the communication lines remained silent. For 30 minutes they tried calling out his command name repeatedly, the desperation in their messages growing. But they were just calling into thin air. Klauser didn't respond because the radio was on silent mode. He was a good soldier. He carried out what he believed to be a legitimate order. He maneuvered his 40 tanks through the snow, heading toward a safe route and an easy goal. He would never know that it was his own team calling out to him. Finally, the German lieutenant colonel slammed his hand down on the table with a loud bang. He's gone, either captured or his radio has been destroyed. We have to assume that the attack on the fuel depot was a failure. The German command was completely bewildered, unable to adjust their plans without realizing that their unit was on the path to destruction, being led astray by a vanished voice. Eddie Voss had no idea about this. He sat trembling in his foxhole as the 3 longest hours of his life passed. He was in a state of panic and didn't know what to do. Will the plan succeed? Will Klauser return? Will the order actually reach him? Will the computer's battery run out of power midway through use? Did he inadvertently drag 300 American soldiers and cuss his unit into a tragic situation? He craned his neck, peering into the darkness towards safety. It was 5:32, and a feeling began to emerge. The sound wasn't the first thing he heard. It was a low-frequency rumbling sound he felt in his chest. A vibration passed through the frozen ground. Then the sound followed, a deafening explosion that echoed throughout the hills. An orange light appeared on the horizon, precisely to the northeast, where he had sent them. A second explosion, a third, a fourth, a fifth, and a sixth. A series of consecutive explosions. Orange and white flames erupted as 40 tons of German steel, fuel, and ammunition began to tear themselves apart. 2 miles to the west, 300 American soldiers at a fuel depot were awakened from their sleep. They hastily took up their guns and took up their fighting positions, staring into the darkness, waiting for the tanks that Eddie had heard about on the radio. They prepared for an attack that never happened. The sound of the explosions echoed throughout the Ardennes area for 20 minutes. The secondary explosions of ammunition erupted like a funeral for an entire unit. Eddie sat still in her foxhole. Listen as the echoes gradually fade away. He felt neither relieved nor proud. He only felt pressured and burdened by what he had done. He pictured Klaus's final moments. The hoarse sound of a smoker was suddenly silenced forever. Clauser died instantly. His command tank detonated a mine, piercing through the flimsy armor and blowing up the fuel tanks in an instant. He never knew he had been deceived, never knew that the orders came from a private American source. In the final moments before bursting into flames, Klausser believed he was employing a legitimate tactic to avoid a trap that didn't exist. 23 members of the German tank crew also died in those first 30 seconds. Many more would die in the following hours under American artillery fire. Alarmed by dozens of unexplained explosions, they began firing at the burning, stranded tanks. By dawn, Issen Phosphor's battalion had been completely annihilated. It wasn't due to superior American tactics, nor overwhelming firepower, but because an uninhibited voice turned a man's pain into a weapon. As soon as the first light appeared, U.S. intelligence patrols were dispatched to investigate the unofficial attack. All they found was a cemetery. The patrol team commander, a young lieutenant, reported to command, his voice trembling. "Huang Hai, I have arrived at the correct coordinates. The tanks landed here. The entire convoy was wiped out. Nothing was left." There was a moment of silence. "But sir, there's nothing here." There were no American positions, no anti-tank guns, and no dead bodies. They simply drove straight into the mines. It was as if they had been given false orders. Subsequent intelligence reports were vague, contradictory, and almost insane. How did a full Pinner battalion, commanded by a veteran, drive straight into a known American minefield? A minefield offers no protection whatsoever. Some analysts suggest it may be due to a radio malfunction. Others suggested that the German commander had suffered a complete mental breakdown. One report even suggested the possibility of coordinated suicide. A precise explanation is simply impossible. It has never appeared in any official documents. The U.S. But the story didn't die, it just dispersed. In 1992, a German military historian interviewed survivors of the Ardennes attack. He spoke with a former officer a former colonel, had been haunted for nearly 50 years by the ghost of Issen. The colonel told the historian, "He disappeared. We tried to call. He was gone. We thought he was ambushed. We thought it was a radio failure. But the Americans never attacked fuel depots. It was very quiet." That never made sense. He told the historian about the strangest thing. When the last fragments were analyzed, the Germans discovered that a regiment had been annihilated in a minefield 3 kilometers from the designated route. The former chief said it was as if they were led by a ghost, by a voice from nowhere, and taken to hell. The historian, with curiosity, began to dig through declassified American reports. He found a report following Captain Morrison's actions. The destroyed German regiment may have been tricked by an unexplained scope broadcast operation. He found a small commendation for Corporal Eddie Voss for outstanding information gathering that saved the Americans' lives. But the historian never found the link. Records of Voss's illicit activities, the lost radio, the stolen notebook, they were all gone, buried, sterilized. Just as Morrison had promised, that the truth remains fragmented across dozens of different files in 2 different languages hidden in a frozen bunker. In a voice speaking perfect German amidst the noise, Eddie Voss never fired a shot in combat. But on a cold winter night, he fought the most important battle of his life. He was armed with only a captured radio, for days of observation, and the courage to be the enemy long enough to save his friends. Ultimately, war isn't always won by those who follow orders. Sometimes it's won by those who know when to break them. If this story resonates with you, subscribe for more untold stories of unseen heroes of World War II. Because sometimes the most important battles are the ones never recorded.